June 6, 1944, 07:25 hours. Sword Beach, Normandy, France. The water hits Lance Corporal Peter Masters like a wall of ice. Waist deep in the English Channel, he staggers forward, one hand gripping his bicycle, the other holding his Thompson submachine gun above the churning surf, 30 rounds in the magazine. 4 grenades in his pack, a pickaxe, 200 feet of hemp rope to cross the Caen Canal if the Germans blow Pegasus Bridge before he gets there. Around him, the morning erupts. Naval guns hammer the coastline with a fury that makes the air itself shake. Shells scream overhead, tearing through smoke and mist toward the German positions dug into the summer houses along the shore. 75mm and 155mm batteries answer back, their rounds geysering salt water 30 feet high. Machine gun fire rakes across the beach from concrete pillboxes hidden in the dunes. Somewhere in the chaos, a sniper takes aim. Masters hits the sand and drops to one knee, gasping. The beach smells of diesel fuel, brine, cordite, and something else, something metallic and final. Bodies float in the shallows behind him. Men scream. The sound of bagpipes cuts through it all, impossibly clear. Private Bill Millen, the Mad Piper, strides through the carnage playing Highland Laddie, as if he's leading a parade through Edinburgh. Then Masters sees him, Brigadier Lord Lovat, commander of the 1st Special Service Brigade, walking off the landing craft with the same casual elegance he might use entering a London club. Behind Lovat, moving with quiet determination through the maelstrom, Major Brian Hilton Jones. The skipper, the Welsh Cambridge graduate who speaks 7 languages and knows more about climbing mountains than most men know about breathing. Masters stands, salutes. It's absurd protocol in hell, but Hilton Jones returns it with a slight nod. Then they're moving forward. Advance. Advance. Field Marshal Montgomery's words ring in Masters' head. Don't stop on the beach. Never stop on the beach. What the Germans don't know, what they cannot know, is that Peter Masters isn't really Peter Masters. His real name is Peter Arani. He's a Jewish refugee from Vienna, and he's come back to Europe for one reason: revenge. July 24th, 1942. 14 months earlier, Aberdyfi, Wales. The recruits stumble off the trucks into driving rain. 87 men, most barely out of their teens. Germans, Austrians, a handful of Czechs and Hungarians, all classified by the British government as enemy aliens, all desperate for a chance to fight. They've come from the Pioneer Corps, the only unit in the British Army that accepts refugees from Nazi-occupied Europe. For months, many of them had been locked in internment camps in Britain, Australia, Canada, treated like threats instead of victims. Some had survived Dachau before fleeing to England. Others had arrived on the Kinder transport, leaving their families behind to face whatever came next. Now they stand in the shadow of Snowdonia, soaking wet, watching Captain Brian Hilton Jones pace in front of them. 29 years old, slim, dark-haired, green eyes that seemed to calculate everything. A mountaineer who spent his youth scaling peaks in Wales and Egypt. A linguist fluent in Welsh, English, French, German, Arabic, Spanish. A man who volunteered for No. 4 Commando because he was bored with desk work at the Intelligence Corps. He stops in front of a private. "What's your name, soldier?" "Hans Firth, sir." "Wrong." Hilton Jones' voice is quiet but cuts like wire. "Private Firth no longer exists. After today, none of you exist. You will each choose a new British name. You will create a cover story regiment, hometown, next of kin, all of it. You will destroy every letter from home, every photograph, every trace of your old identity, and you have 15 minutes to decide who you're going to be for the rest of your lives." The men stare at him, some in disbelief, some with grim understanding. They know why. If the Nazis capture Jewish commandos fighting in British uniforms, they won't treat them as prisoners of war. They'll execute them. The fake British names, the Church of England dog tags, it's protection. Thin as paper, but it's something. Paul Hornig becomes Paul Streeton. Hans Firth becomes Harry Drew. Manfred Gans becomes Fred Gray. Peter Arani, the Viennese teenager who watched the Nazis march into Austria in 1938, becomes Peter Masters within minutes. 87 enemy aliens transform into British commandos, at least on paper. Then the real work begins. August-December 1942. The making of X-Troop. They call it X-Troop because Winston Churchill himself named it. Because they will be unknown warriors, the Prime Minister declared. They must perforce be considered an unknown quantity. Since the algebraic symbol for the unknown is X, let us call them X-Troop. Officially, they're number 3 Troop of number 10 Inter-Allied Commando. But that designation hides what they really are. A suicide squad of Jewish refugees trained to infiltrate German lines, interrogate prisoners, and gather intelligence that no British-born soldier could obtain. They speak perfect German. They know the culture, the military protocols, the way Wehrmacht officers think, and they hate the Nazis with a fury that burns hotter than any patriotic sentiment ever could. The training is designed to break them. Dawn to dusk, they march through the mountains of Wales with full packs and weapons. They practice beach assaults in the freezing waters off Aberdyfi, live ammunition drills, cliff scaling, parachute training, demolition work. They learn to pick locks, break into buildings, move silently through darkness. One night, Hilton Jones orders them to infiltrate Harlech Castle guarded by the Home Guard and retrieve classified documents. They succeed. The Home Guard is furious. Hilton Jones is pleased. The villagers of Aberdyfi welcome them with surprising warmth. Unlike regular soldiers, the X-Troopers don't live in barracks. They're billeted with local families, eating at Welsh kitchen tables, attending village dances on Saturday nights. Max Lewinsky, a professional dancer from Prague who now goes by Max Laddie, becomes so popular at these gatherings that he marries a local girl, Margaret Rees. She never learns his real name until after the war. But the mission is never far from anyone's mind. Manfred Ganz, now Fred Gray, is 20 years old, Orthodox Jewish. His family was prominent in Germany before Hitler came to power. At his bar mitzvah in 1935, young Manfred gave a speech that made his father weep. The Nazis are calling us the enemy. They say we are vermin, less than human. But our Torah teaches us to be ethical and forthright. That is who we really are. Now, 7 years later, Manfred trains to kill the men who destroyed his world. August 19, 1942. Operation Jubilee, Dieppe, France. The first X-Troopers to see combat never make it off the beach. 5 men, Maurice Latimer, Brian Platt, George Bate, Charles Rice, Joseph Smith, land at Dieppe with orders to raid German headquarters and secure documents, possibly an Enigma machine. The operation is a disaster from the start. German machine guns cut down Allied soldiers by the hundreds. The beach turns red. Bodies pile up against the seawall. Latimer and his team can't reach their objective, can't even get off the killing ground. By the time the retreat is called, over 1,000 Allied soldiers are dead, 2,000 wounded, 2,000 more captured. But X-Troop has been blooded, and Hilton Jones has learned what his men are capable of under fire. The answer? Anything. May 1944. The Normandy coast, France. Lieutenant George Lane, real name György Lanyi, Hungarian Olympic water polo champion, paddles a kayak through darkness toward the French shoreline. His mission? Operation Tarbrush. A series of reconnaissance raids to gather intelligence on German beach defenses before D-Day. Lane is captured almost immediately. Interrogated. The Germans don't know he's Jewish, don't know he speaks perfect German, don't know he's memorizing every detail of their mine placements, their defensive positions, their troop movements. When he finally escapes or is released, the records aren't clear. Lane brings back information that changes the invasion plan. The intelligence has a direct bearing on the final plans for Overlord. His military cross-citation will later state. Without Lane's reconnaissance, D-Day might have failed before it began. June 6, 1944. 08:30 hours. Inland from Sword Beach. Masters pedals hard, legs burning, lungs screaming for air. The bicycle troop, officially number 1 troop of number 6 commando, is racing inland toward Pegasus Bridge. If the intelligence is correct, British glider troops under Major John Howard should have captured the bridge over the Caen Canal just after midnight, but the bridge is miles behind German lines. Howard's men will be surrounded, outnumbered, running out of ammunition. They need reinforcements. Now, the French villagers open their doors as the cyclists flash past. Vive la France! Vive les Tomies! Someone in a church steeple takes a shot at them. The round winds past Master's head. He doesn't slow down. They approach Bénouville, the commune just outside the bridge. The lead cyclist jerks sideways and falls, dead before he hits the ground. The troop commander shouts for cover. Then he points at Masters. Scout ahead. Find out what we're facing. Masters knows why he was chosen. He's expendable. The ex-troopers are always the ones sent into the meat grinder first. The British regulars don't trust them, don't want them, see them as cannon fodder. It doesn't matter that Hilton Jones fought to have his men treated like proper soldiers. It doesn't matter that they've proven themselves in dozens of operations. They're still enemy aliens, still Jews, still other. Masters moves forward alone, his Thompson gun ready. Village streets empty except for debris and smoke. Then the Germans open fire. Masters dives behind a wall, unleashes a burst from his weapon. The Thompson jams. He's alone, defenseless, certain this is the end. Then he hears it. Boots pounding the cobblestones. The bicycle troop charges into Bénouville with bayonets fixed, screaming like demons. The Germans break and run. 20 minutes later, Masters reaches Pegasus Bridge. It's intact, still in British hands. Major Howard's glider troops are holding. Barely, but they're holding. The relief on their faces when they see the commandos is almost painful to witness. Just after 1 p.m., Lord Lovat's main force arrives. The eastern flank of the invasion is secure. Later that day, Masters interrogates a German officer. The man is arrogant at first, until Masters responds in perfect Berlin German, asking questions that demonstrate an intimate knowledge of Wehrmacht tactics. The officer's face goes pale. He talks. Masters marches 40 prisoners of war back to British lines. It's the first interrogation of thousands. Ex-troops war is just beginning. Summer-fall, 1944. The Netherlands and Germany. The ex-troopers are everywhere now. Attached in small groups to regular commando units, they fight through Normandy, cross into Belgium, push into the Netherlands. They're used as shock troops for the most dangerous missions. Intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. Prisoner interrogation on active battlefields. Raids on German headquarters. Ian Harris, real name Hans Ludwig Hajos, single-handedly convinces the entire German garrison of Osnabrück to surrender in April of 1945. Hundreds of Wehrmacht soldiers laying down their weapons because one ex-trooper walks into their command post and tells them, in flawless German, that resistance is futile. Paul Streeton, Paul Hornig, lands in Sicily and fights until shrapnel tears through his body. He survives. Barely. Captain Brian Hilton Jones is captured during a patrol, trying to lead resistance fighters through German lines. He's taken to a field hospital. Weeks later, Number 46 Royal Marine Commando overruns the hospital at Pont-l'Évêque and finds him, wounded, alive, unbroken. And then there's Manfred Gans, Fred Gray, the Orthodox Jew from Germany who gave that speech at his bar mitzvah about remaining ethical in the face of evil. May 8, 1945, Theresienstadt concentration camp, Czechoslovakia. Corporal Fred Gray commandeers a jeep and driver 2 days after Germany surrenders. He doesn't ask permission, doesn't file paperwork, just takes the vehicle and drives straight from Holland through the wreckage of the Reich toward Czechoslovakia. He's looking for his parents. When he last saw them, they were in Amsterdam, Dutch citizens who'd fled Germany before the war. Then the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. His parents were deported to Theresienstadt, the model camp that the Germans showed to Red Cross inspectors. The place Hitler's regime pretended was humane. Gray doesn't know if they're alive, doesn't know if he'll find anything except mass graves and ashes. But he drives anyway, 2 days straight. No sleep, no rest. When he reaches Theresienstadt on May 10th, the camp is in chaos. Soviet forces have liberated it, but thousands of prisoners are still there, too sick to move, too traumatized to leave, waiting for someone to tell them what happens next. Gray walks through the gates, starts asking questions in German, in Dutch, shows photographs that he wasn't supposed to keep, describes his mother, his father. Their names before the Nazis forced them to change everything, and then someone points, "There, that man. I think that's who you're looking for." Gray runs, finds his father first, then his mother, alive, impossibly, miraculously alive. When word spreads through the camp that a British soldier has found his parents, survivors weep openly. A son has returned. Not all Jews in the world have been killed. Some families still exist. Gray gets his parents out, arranges transport, paperwork, medical care. He saves them the same way he's been saving others for 3 years, by refusing to accept that anything is impossible. September 1945, Germany. The occupation begins. X-Troop is officially disbanded, but the work continues. Most of the surviving commandos remain in Germany, using their language skills and intelligence training for denazification efforts. They interrogate high-ranking Nazis, translate captured documents, hunt war criminals trying to disappear into civilian life, gather evidence for the Nuremberg trials. Ian Harris tracks down SS officers hiding in Bavaria. Peter Masters helps Allied authorities identify collaborators. The X-Troopers, who started the war as despised refugees, end it as some of the most valuable intelligence assets in the British occupation forces. But recognition comes slowly. Even after everything they've done, they're still technically enemy aliens, still waiting for naturalization, still fighting to prove they deserve to be British. Many of them keep their noms de guerre for the rest of their lives. Peter Aroney remains Peter Masters. Paul Hornig remains Paul Streeton. The names they invented in 15 minutes during a rainstorm in Wales become their permanent identities, a final transformation from refugees into soldiers, from victims into warriors. The cost of X-Troop. Of the 87 men who passed through X-Troop during the war, more than half were killed, wounded, or disappeared. 20 died in action. Others were captured and never seen again. Some were executed by the Nazis despite their fake British identities. The Church of England dog tags didn't always save them. They were buried under crosses with false names. Their families, if any survived, often never learned what happened to them. The secrecy that protected X-Troop during the war became a shroud after it. Captain Brian Hilton Jones, the skipper who molded enemy aliens into commandos, survived the war. In 1946, he wrote a secret report from his home in Caernarfon, Wales. Despite many and serious difficulties, this band of enemy alien volunteers earned for itself a not unflattering reputation. They were conspicuously successful and earned high praise all round. They were the most interesting and worthwhile branch of No. 10 Commando. In 1970, Hilton Jones died in a car accident. By then, X-Troop had faded into classified files and fading memories. The story of Jewish refugees who became Britain's secret shock troops was buried under layers of official silence. After the war, Peter Masters moved to America, studied art at Yale, worked for the government on anti-poverty programs, helped design the Profiles of Poverty exhibition at the Smithsonian. He never forgot Sword Beach, never forgot the taste of salt water and cordite, never forgot what it felt like to be expendable. Paul Streeton became an economist, senior advisor to the World Bank, spent his life working on behalf of the poor in developing nations. The same determination that carried him off the beaches of Sicily carried him through decades of fighting for people who had nothing. Manfred Ganz became an MIT-trained chemical engineer, held numerous patents. After retirement, he worked for the United Nations, traveling to developing countries to help build and repair chemical plants. His parents, whom he rescued from Theresienstadt, lived long enough to see their son become exactly who he'd promised to be at his bar mitzvah, ethical and forthright. And Ian Harris, who convinced an entire German garrison to surrender, returned to a quiet life in Britain. Like so many ex-troopers, he didn't talk much about the war, didn't seek recognition, just lived. In 1999, some of the surviving ex-troopers returned to Aberdyfi, Wales. They commissioned a memorial in Penhaligon Park, overlooking the harbour, where they'd practiced beach assaults half a century earlier. The memorial was dedicated to the men of 3 Troop No. 10 Inter-Allied Commando, 20 killed in action. The memorial doesn't mention that 82 of the 87 men were Jewish, doesn't say they were refugees from Nazi persecution, doesn't explain that they came back to Europe not just to liberate it, but to exact revenge on the regime that murdered their families. The veterans decided to leave that part out, perhaps because the wounds were still too raw, perhaps because they'd spent so long hiding who they really were that hiding came naturally, or perhaps because they believed their actions spoke louder than any words carved in stone. But their actions do speak. They scream. They scream about teenagers who escaped Hitler's camps and returned to hunt his officers one by one, about refugees classified as enemy aliens who became Britain's most effective interrogators and commandos, about Jews told they were lambs to the slaughter who proved they were lions instead. They scream about Peter Masters cycling through minefields with a bicycle on his back and a Thompson gun in his hands, about Manfred Gans driving 2 days straight through the ruins of the Third Reich to find his parents, about Brian Hilton Jones molding despised refugees into warriors so effective that British generals fought over who got to command them. The story of X-Troop isn't just about Jewish commandos in World War II. It's about what happens when you give people who have lost everything a chance to fight back. It's about transformation from victims to soldiers, from refugees to heroes, from the hunted to the hunters. They were unknown warriors, an unknown quantity, X-Troop, and they were magnificent.